could you tell me your names, please? I'm going to caption it.
Okay, Steina Vasulka.
Actually, I'm Woody Vasulka, but I have more names, but this is my American name. But I was born...
No straight answer out of this guy.
No, that's cool, that's cool. And what's your... Tell me another name.
Oh, like the man that was put on me was Bohuslav, which means he who celebrates God, or God who is celebrated. I mean, man that is celebrated by God. It's an inversion of this kind of version of relationship between God and me, which this was never the issue in my life until now, when I'm going to face the mighty. But anyway, so then the second name is Icelandic name. You see, when I emigrated from Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at that time, it was the kind of, I was trying to kind of live in Iceland, but I of course immediately realized that they wouldn't take me in a foreign name. Actually, you informed me you have to have a different name. So kind of a Icelandized my name into what did I say? Did I call myself?
You don't even remember your own name?
It was a short period only.
Timotheus?
It was Timotheus Pétursson, because my father was Peter, and they always give you a name after your father. And Timotheus, it was the problem I had with my God definition, if I was celebrating the God or God would celebrate me. So, but that was it. And they never accepted the Timotheus. It meant something silly, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very silly.
What is it silly about it?
Just that it is so un-Icelandic, it couldn't be, and that they forced a name upon you that everybody understood the irony of taking his name.
Yeah.
Is that how it is for you?
What?
The issue of naming yourself and the way in which it relates to the thing that you do.
Yeah, yeah. No,
But
I mean, they kept this law for a short time because it was extraordinarily unpopular to have people change the name just because they changed nationality.
But
But
enough
you became
about
Icelander.
that name.
You became Icelander.
Yes, I did.
There was a Barken in there.
But now I'm in the shame of the nation. But the third name I'm carrying is, of course, Woody Vasulka.
Yeah.
And how did the Woody come up? Do you remember that, Steina?
No, tell me.
Okay. When I was a boy after the war, at the age perhaps 15, I started to play jazz and play in the band. And suddenly I come and say, hey, you guys, there's a new band in what's called Blue Danube Network, which is the military station in Vienna. You know, that's in Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia. Next in Vienna. And so I say, what are you talking about? Oh, there's a band called Woody Herman, which we haven't heard. We already heard Stan Kenton, which is like a competition with legitimate music, you know. And they say, Woody. Okay, I got Woody name in my band and my town, and then Steina brought it to America somehow. Why did you bring it to America with you?
I think you said call me Woody because nobody could pronounce
I see.
Bohuslav.
So it became Woody. That name is also flat. As you say in Czech, it's Woody.
Woody.
And here they always kind of look at me, and you know what Woody means. And
So never ask such a question like
Yeah,
that.
I just realised this.
just a kind of
But the naming of things is important.
Right.
It's about... Well, I don't know what it's about. I should be asking you what it's about. So my central inquiry, which may or may not line up with what you want to talk about, but I'm very happy to be steered by where you want to go,
Yeah.
is the issue around who you are, what what part of, what era of humanity and human creativity you're in. And I see, and you can argue this is wrong, but I'll just lay you something to respond to, is that we're at that moment, it would seem, where there's an analog grasp of things and there's a digital grasp of things. Do you think there is such a thing? What is the analog? What is the digital, if they in fact exist?
Oh, we are. I mean, you want to talk?
Well, I think culturally it's very different. It really is different. Thinking everything about it. It's like going through a brain surgery, but this one lasted a few years, you know. And we actually did the first digital very long time ago, but unknowingly, because we asked our friend designer to give us a fast switcher that could switch even on field. And that is, I remember, first time I saw integrated circuits. And he was using digital technology, which makes a total sense if you're going to be switching, especially fast switching. But that time we were just very comfortably into analog, and we didn't know there would ever be anything else. And analog meant everything to us. It meant the real time, that you just start a camera and you roll it. In the beginning there was very limited way to edit, so that was very analog to have a hard time editing, whereas in digital it is piece of cake. You can take out single frames anywhere you want to fix. So, and we had there also, it was absolutely clear, the original was the best you could hope for, and every copy thereafter was degradation. So suddenly to be into digital when there is no degradation, it took a while mentally to understand that, because it is a different concept of making art without degradation.
Do you think we're past the Rubicon?
Yeah,
We are.
yeah.
Okay.
Rubicon, huh?
What do you think?
Oh, I have completely different
Ah,
reading
that's
of
good.
this. So, first of all, when I left film, which was when I came to the States from Czech Republic, I was educated in filmmaking in the film school of Prague, which is very prestigious. And students, we work with 35mm film. We wouldn't even touch 16. That was just completely out of question. So when I came, I edited film and live off that a little bit. But then I got this involvement with Francis Thompson and Alexander Hammett, which is two prominent aging cinematographers. And so I started to work with 70mm film as well. And so I worked with 35 and then 70mm in multi-screen. So kind of it was an overwhelming quality production of exhibit type. And the last one was for this exhibit in Texas. What was it called? I forgot the name. But anyway, that was a 3-screen, large screen a movie. But then I stumbled over half-inch video, and it changed my life completely, because suddenly I understood. It is not the image, it's the material from which images are made. And it's the organization of that image that makes the difference. Because I couldn't face any Antonionis and Fellinis or all, because that was done. They made this, and I wasn't brave to compete with that and go to Hollywood and try to reinvent the world. But I saw this small piece of instrument that kind of I could own and put the rules on it and start from scratch. And this is what my generation was about. We could not be epigons anymore because it was done. The modern movement had changed the world. There was no way to sneak in another part of it, accept it. So that's how it all began. So instead of working with camera as primary deliverer of the sort of a symbolic thing, like an image, I went into looking into the instruments that would do alternate depiction of the world, which was waveform generators, mostly originated in audio synthesis. And then we built a lot of things that altered things, colorized things, restructured things. So the source was this kind of a material that was shaped differently, processed and depicted and meant something different. Of course, there always was part of it which was camera, but it was like a documenting of time and go through the gay theaters and rock and roll and all the what I call the American decadent period, and the alternate culture of the youth culture that totally overshadowed the Hollywood interests and all. So we were integrated in that time.
Do you feel that the timeline that is derived from film, the slicing up of time, is the right way to deal? Sorry, this is very different. Yeah, I'll go with is the right way to deal with movement, because if you work with oscillators, you don't have to deal with slices of time, and it seems to me that's something you've done. You've played with that. So how do you feel about the constraints of the time slice?
So I have first my definition, and maybe you could criticize that. Anyway, film is about what happens between two frames, preceding and succeeding. That means between that, your perception makes the major processing. It has to connect or set up the meaning of the preceding with succeeding in a sense of what's called apparent motion. That is the kind of a result of this. And once you make a train of these images, you have sort of a continuous illusion of the motion, but still that is the apparatus that presents that phenomenology. Now, that means there is a shutter that's in the operation that separates this, and what's called the black in between is simply the very important thing for the after image that comes after. But all the processing in a mind has to be psychologically integrated. The same happens, of course, in video, but let's say when you use an oscillator or all the analog devices to do it, then you actually put in continuity of certain events that are not segmented, but they have to be the same way interpreted. But the mind deals it as a result the same, but they understand the alien world that comes from that type of abstraction. Now, but that existed before. There's abstract film, and that abstract already, Whitney Brothers and all the used apparatus, also they used early computers. We were just entering this electronic world through the sound synthesis and some video processing, equipment like keys, colorizers, and all kind of studio-like equipment. But we were able to get attention of young engineers and kind of kind of equipment makers that were hiding from the Vietnam War. That we lived slept on the floor in the same places and worked together on same interests. So that generation brought in, say, sort of independence from studio, which is official, and industrial, enterprise, to the community. And that's how the first kind of a group definition of the alternate video came about. Computer was a whole different story, because in an analog way, I spent a lot of time by make tables of waveforms, square, triangle, and sine, and all these things, in just to understand the language. But even before I finished it, there was already tables I had to make in digital thing between two elements, horizontal and vertical, and I had to include Boolean algebra and make tables of Boolean algebra as the language, because I was actually intrigued right from the beginning of this alternate image making. What's the material? What's the rules? What makes the picture? How does brain deal with it? How is the abstraction of it? How is it explained to the mind? And these questions captivated me, and they still kind of captivate me, going into what's called the second life, which itself is not designed to do this, but you can pervert it into a research or mind researching as well principle. That's my genesis.
Okay. And how do you respond to my question? Do you remember it?
Repeat the question.
Hold on. I've got to find the button here, which is
No, it's okay. Just
refusing. It gives me fear. It's. I suppose the question that it kind of evolves into, if you'll go with me, was something Woody was saying about the material. The thing about the analog, I suppose,
Yeah.
you've got this box,
yeah.
many boxes. You can take the lid off.
Yeah.
You can get in there, and you can do stuff. And the thing with digital is that the boxes are conceptual. So I'm kind of interested in the material. I mean, if you expand from what he was saying there, and
Yeah.
in your own terms.
No, it is interesting that for every effect we had a box. That was how it was done. You want to do keying, you get a keyer. You want to do switching, you get a switcher. So on and so forth. And so we always lived off this, and it was this patchwork to always the ins and the outs. And typically, then when it started going into digital, it was all about emulating analog, because you have to build on something, you have to preconceive what effect you want, so you have to go from what you know, which was analog. And it's a funny period now. I remember when suddenly special effects, so-called, or tricks, or whatever you call them, could be done in software. And the skepticism about doing it in software, meaning there was no box. And there was somebody wrote a code, and it would do the keying or the colorizing. It was kind of mind-boggling, I would say, you know. And it made us all have to take our boxes and put them on the shelf where they sit to this day, unused. You know, it's a major. And in the going over to the I wouldn't call it the digital. For me, it was the software that revolutionized everything. That would just sit in front of a computer and do your composition. And mind you, there was a lot of multi-screens before, but it was cumbersome and kind of a little clumsy. But digital is made for multi-screen.
Are you saying there's a false dichotomy between analog and digital?
Yeah, this is kind of one of the things that changed so much. The fluidity of multi-screening within one screen or on multiple screens, because it's so easy to synchronize, it's so easy to change shapes and sizes and everything. So that, of course, changes the style and changes the outcome and the utterance and what interpretation. It changes everything. So that's been a very interesting way to slowly go over, and thank God for the Japanese, because Western world is conservative. There was a great sentiment on keeping the analog and keeping the big television station with big cameras that they had put a lot of money into. But the Japanese just mercilessly sent us this digital cameras, camcorders, and they were smaller and they were better and sharper and everything. So there was no way to resist it.
But they avoided completely the trauma of the transition. You don't remember that? We were suddenly powerless because we did not understand how to program it.
Yeah.
I had to learn all the language about how to... I even wrote a program, but it totally retarded us in time and production, because we lost the control over the content. We could still play and discover, but we already had images before that we could touch physically. We could open the box and change the state of the image on the screen. But here there was nothing to open, and we had to apply for education. We had to agonize before we ask institution to give us money. How can we actually apply it to our art? The art became questionable, and the whole thing has changed and set us back for 10 years, I think.
I wouldn't say so.
Not 10 years, 3 years.
It set us back in a certain way, and it threw us forward in another way.
That's right.
Because suddenly you could compose within the frame, and you could take elements in the frame that changed and others in the frame that would not change. And it's kind of to be able to access image inside the frame instead of always by the whole frame is revolutionary and is being used, like you see that the young people use it without even knowing how difficult it used to be to do.
Is that a key aesthetic distinction? The issue around resolution independence,
Yeah,
in that, to put something inside a screen
yeah,
and to have detail,
yeah.
you have to have better resolution. This is my area, so I'm just
Yeah.
pushing you into this.
Yeah.
I understand the aesthetics of low res.
Yeah.
It is. Let me ask a slightly different question. What is the key aesthetic distinction, if there is one, between analog and digital?
Okay, so then the term aesthetics has not been used in this family much, you see, because in a way for us the tool is the teacher, and
Yeah.
tool decides what kind of a quality as what you describe as resolution or what other quality, quality of an edge, you see, quality of continuity, or all these what we could say are of an aesthetic kind. We had to kind of almost jettison, For us, the idea of the dynamics of the system, its permutation, change, its suggestion of its depth or shallow, kind of a perception of it. All these are models or suggestions. They are only sketches in low-res equipment. But we knew one day these are just the models for the work we have done, that we could put them through some apparatus. We always look at each other and said, it's really disaster, this doesn't look like apple, it looks like a pear, but it isn't supposed to be an apple, but it wasn't. So anyway, all these discrepancies didn't disturb us because we had reached in the register of different aesthetics, which you don't have to discuss. And people ask us, how do you choose the objects? Like we have this opening here, introduction of Vasulka's at Tate. And the first question was, how could you figure out these objects that you put in your work, early work, partly digital? And I said, well, you just look around where you live, and how did painters, they just look at this table where they had some flowers or something. We just look around, and there was a piece of bread, and there was a shoe. So that's what we did, and they were amazed that we had this power of aesthetics, which we were just opportunists as far as image. We just took what we find in the viewfinder as, film viewfinder has a limited amount of interest. You cannot look through the camera and you see everything possible. It's just only one or two things you would take. So that's what we learn, and that's what you take, and that's what becomes aesthetic, because the camera accepts it as correctly framed or whatever it means. So, but that kind of what essence of it was in fact the performance of this transition. It was the dynamic transition from one state to another. And if you do it elegant way or continuity or meaningful transition, it creates its own content, and that also brings the question: is the aesthetics there? But we believe both. I think that the aesthetics is given to you by extra a gift. It's the muses that they say, okay, this person can represent my interest, and they appoint you to be the artist. There's nothing else.
Let me stop you for a second.
Yeah, but go.
Cough your head off. It's okay. It's fine. I'm not hung up about it. Just do it. Just get it out.
Yeah, when I heard this coughing, I was wondering,
It's
Maybe it's hers. Yeah.
What I was going to say to you at the beginning of this is I'm not going to cut this up. There's no. This is what it is. So.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I really like that. I think aesthetics are I don't know, it's my position. It's sometimes kind of bourgeois, basically. But I
Oh,
have to
don't feel
offer-
bad. Just attack us directly,
No.
straight,
No attack.
because we don't have the truth. You know,
no.
we just live by improvisation. Everything we do now, we do by instinct, possibility, and improvisation.
But relating to the dynamics of a system, yeah.
Yeah.
And the
It-
dynamic now, the thorny issue or a non-issue is the question. You know, there's been a long time dependency on the idea of truth to materials. It was very dominant last century, the truth of the material, because if you found the truth of the material, you could let your own truth, all of that stuff. Interesting issue around digitality is, and the analog just before, especially in the oscillator moment, was whether or not the material was disappearing, or whether we just can't see it because we haven't eyes to see yet. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's interesting about the materiality, because right from the get-go, we were kind of always accused of being technical, as if that was bad. And so you start looking at the art world, it's all technical. I mean, every technique from even just the strands of the canvas, I mean, you can go anywhere. Every artist is obsessed with technique and whatever technique he uses. And as you say, technologically based, that your style differs from with the material you use. The material predicts actually what your art is going to look like. And I didn't understand this sentiment from that point of view. But it is also true that with the digital, it's basically gone, the materiality. It is all digital. It is one thing. And within that, you get a lot of freedom, like to change the sizes and shapes of the frames, to change the resolution, to change from European system to American system, and that it's all fluid, you know. But it takes away this idea of materiality, doesn't it?
I mean, my question is in a different area. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when we looked at Avatar, which is a whole different discussion, but you see, this is digital.
Yeah.
And of course, it's made out of digits, but digits are not there, you know. It's so perfect now that you can obscure any materiality of this kind of medium. And you don't even talk about what was there before and after, because if you are a new generation, you just come to the perfect image in 3D. It's completely remarkable that suddenly this question or discussion about image being a reductionist interest has an reductionist interest, like what we saw in in the show of Donsberg, you know, van Donsberg.
Theo van Donsberg.
You know, it's so reductionist painting, yet it's very exuberant painting that has all the emotional qualities that you could ever wish to have. And so I would not be even interested in trying to analyze things that are so obvious, you see. It's clear that the resolution has its quality, but it has to be with the subject which it is attached to, and its impairment to many works that we have done. If it's too good, then too perfect, then you have to say, okay, I'm abandoning the other principles, because you can dwell on something in a different timing, in different context. You start picking up different subjects. You're starting to go towards the world of art, reinventing. Like now, everybody's working with feeling of wood again, like this one woman coming from China, and you see the writing symbols of yin and yang in the different formations again. So it's a whole kind of aesthetic. Is a backlash of intellectual protest and achievement and manipulation and, in fact, exploitation. You see, so that's why I'm not interested. I'm rather in that ethical part of simplicity and some kind of a bringing in like dialogue with the machine and these things. I still believe there's a lot to learn from the structure of a machine, and then in modality of performance of a computer, which is barely spoken, you know. And now if you talk about new physics, how they will sort of influence that. And what I translate myself into this contemporarity, or sort of not being enemy of the past, but being really interested in the future. Because before you couldn't make art without reflection upon the past. But I think the moment of transition between now and the next moment is as dramatic and as interesting. And it's not a stigma that we should just reject. I think it's time now. And there's so much happening now that we can't anymore anyway.
Yeah.
So where do you live? You know, what's your mind doing? And especially now with my age, I'm losing my mind, which is interesting. I could still live in contemporarity. And that's also probably one of the motivation of me still looking at the edge somewhere, even if I don't maybe see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of reminded. I have a software that is unpredictable because it is made in a way that you can violate the connections. And this is something that software always tries to prevent, that there would be any mistake. And that's why images today, the whole digital culture is so uniform and in a way uninterested in the image because it's always so beautiful and perfect. And I'm very grateful to have this software that does it. And whenever I try to introduce it to my colleagues, I say, you know, there are things that are totally unpredictable. It kind of turns them off. They say, no, I would rather select a software that does what I want to do with it. So, but why am I saying this? Because that was one of the main thing in the analog. It was the unpredictability, that you hooked something up, you connected it wrong, or you cross-signaled, or signal would go back in a kind of feedback. And these were the exciting things.
And talking about feedback, you know, this was the gift of God. It started, of course, in electronic acoustics, but it also is just, of course, echo. Echo in the space is actually a feedback, and there were maybe a couple of painters that dealt with it in some strange way, like Franz Kupka and so. But this idea to have a system that feeds into itself, now we have that, of course, even in digital images, but we build a whole machine just to see the digital feedback faster and faster. So we made a whole effort to have a feedback at 9 megahertz, seeing how it's gonna look, but when we made it, of course, it was just very prosaic. But the textures that came out of it in the 70s, that was part of the 70s for us, was the miracle. You know, you can have a independent, again, source, because in analog image we get a lot of feedback as a gift.
Well, that's one of the most wonderful things, as far as I understand it, about creativity, is you touch material and something outside of your conception occurs, which leads you forward.
Exactly.
So with the digital, do you not find this in it?
Yeah, it is in there.
Now,
Okay.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the character of?
But it is hard to find.
and it's
And
never used.
As I say, every software engineer tries to get rid of it.
to avoid it.
Imperfection.
Yeah, right.
That's
So,
their job.
That's their job.
yeah.
But how do you find it? What do you? Where is it leading you? This search to find that thing.
I mean, that thing is between two frames, proceeding and succeeding. So it's replacing the mind.
You don't think we should ditch the slicing of time?
You know, of course, I thought about it all my life. If there is continuity in perception, you know. But then, if you think about it, if you watch cars in sunset, and you look at these wheels turning, you see them actually animated. And there's one place in Santa Fe, and what's cross-section, that light gets very low. It has to be just happening when it's what's called grazing. And once it gets into that position, some part of the light produces this miracle. It's very mundane, that you see a stroboscopic event on every car that passes by. And I thought, can mind avoid frame system? Is it possible? Is capable? And if you look at it, I don't know in what part of the brain frame formates. It's not probably retina. That's probably retinal or random. But it has to come to some organization. And I think the mind gets to it, before it gets interpreted, it gets probably a frame.
I mean, the Buddhists
assembled.
would have that there are 108 million chronons in every second.
Right. Yeah,
And I asked why, they said because the Buddha counted them.
right. Okay, but what comes to your mind is much more fluent, because the interpretation cannot be made in that time. I think the perception is probably very high rate. We don't even believe it's true, because doctors usually talk about, visual psychologists, they limit it. They say there is only that much perception that could be actually dealt with. But all the processes, they have no idea actually what's in between, and how the retina, how fast is the retinal connection there. And also how much we predict the image that's coming, because once it's there, of course, and train of it, we probably can imagine, a mind can manufacture the missing sort of parts, or like the ball running on a guy that's supposed to catch it in such a speed. There's no way that brain can calculate where it is now. It has to just react. So the whole thing must be short-circuited somewhere. So it's kind of interesting that now they're just there, that the scientists are just opening the box of the brain and they look at it, and they'll probably at the end of the century find probably a lot, or not all, because there's no way to get that close. There maybe is a way, I don't know. They may build this, but they say it's more synapses than in the galaxy, our galaxy. And then we believe there's infinite amount of worlds and galaxies and all. So this all should be contained in one brain. I don't know.
I'll go with that.
I'll go with
The
that.
whole universe in a grain of sand, absolutely.
But still,
You know, one interesting thing, probably one of the most interesting things that's happened so far I've done 10 interviews, and I was working with some people in Los Angeles who are working on, it doesn't even matter, it doesn't matter. The point is that I asked them a question about resolution. That's just a detail thing. And they said to me, that's the wrong question. So I've been asking you a set of questions. On the presumption that everything that I've asked is the wrong question, what do you think is the right question? With reference to creativity, the immaterial, the perceptual, our state, our primate state, and our act as creative beings. Is there anything to be said around all of that?
That's an interesting question, because we see the return of the high-res into, again, principles, like the modern art, what it did. It's a remarkable work on reductionist ideology. And it opened different mind world. It's a different category. And again, that we can reject the world of photography to some degree for a while. That's another aspect, because we used to call it truth. Like there was a debate in film, between the Hungarians, communists, critics, and the Western ideologues that Hollywood talking about what truth is. And they would say photography is the truth, because the camera doesn't have a strategy, but then you find out it's not completely true. And if they look at film. But what I discovered for myself was, when you take a frame, which I worked with a tool called scan processor. And what scan processor can do, it takes really a frame and just takes the frame and puts it on another frame, which is just holding the frame. And then you see it becomes not truth anymore. It's manipulated to the degree that it's manipulated. You can turn it around, upside down, squash it, take it apart, and just becomes the medium, and you suddenly alienate yourself. I mean, you become alien to truth of a photography. And so photography becomes the lonely document of time, which is supposed to be the authenticity of time. And so these are questions that were discussed by the kind of avant-garde of the 30s and 40s. But they were answered, because they were always too... And the Russians brought it to absurd moment when they took film and made completely political illusionist products, like the operas from, the harvest of the Ukraines. It's just funny. But anyway, so I think it comes with some kind of a problem of general question of what we look at, if it's reality or not. That question, if the resolution represents more reality or it obscures it, because these new films look so clean and so real, but we know they are getting to the abstract plasticity, which was well beyond any real experience or reality, the real surface. So people are sometimes coming back to roughness. As you know, a lot of artists now negate the plastic.
I mean, something I've discovered in my own work is that I do works at certain resolutions.
Yeah.
When I increase the resolution in the work and expose it to the public, only at certain points does the public have deeper engagements, longer engagements.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's quantum. It's not quantitative. There are quantum moments of engagement, which are I'm kind of measuring. Not that I'm into measuring it, because it's only useful for selling things to know these kind of measurements. But it's so interesting that the engagements double each time. When I hit a boundary of resolution, like 720 pixels up to 965, suddenly double the engagement. Nothing before.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like that moment at dusk where your rods and cones are switching over, and you're looking at the traffic lights, and the lights are too bright, like too colourful.
Yeah.
Because the technologies are switching over, and it's the fluttering between the technologies.
Yeah.
So in my own work, I'm sort of discovering, I'm theorising, I'm guessing that the switching over technologies of resolution and engagement. And here we get to the plasticity, here we get to the photorealism, all of that stuff, all of those old arguments.
No, I tell you what you're saying, actually, to me. If you present a mind with many details, which is usually lower, as strangely enough, because it has to recover the detail, which is tremendous work for the mind. If you give it less work by making it less points, you call them points, but are points of media, and they are not points of perception. In fact, you make it fluid, clean, extraordinarily simplified to the mind, and mind loves it because it doesn't have to do anything. It's kind of a relief for the mind, so you can float away from the meaning of interpreting it. Work to say, this means that.
Okay, brilliant.
That you suggested it.
No. Well, the other issue.
I feast on what you said.
Thank you. The other thing is the issue of entrainment with art, because at the moment, or up until now, especially with the conceptual, we're using interpretive tools. Here's a piece of art, interpret it. And the interesting thing about engagement is the issue of entrainment. 2 clocks with pendulums. Eventually, we have entrainment.
Right.
And what's interesting to me with digital and where we might be going is the possibility that the audience entrains with the work or with the intention of the artist, as opposed to reads and interprets and all that stuff, which is medieval in concept. Do you want some water?
Yeah, I'll take some water.
So we have 3 elements now. We have the audience, we have the medium, and we have the intent of the artist, or sometimes it's not even the intent, it's the service in which the tool is in mutual relationship. So, and then this our mind, maybe it's another element that through this intent, instrumentation, perception, and explanation or realization, that would be the chain which would have something to do with each other, and each element of it would be required in certain period of human development or interest. Or is this a social or political or structuralist or physical or metaphysical? These are the questions that should be looked at first, and then we talk about medium. But medium is trying to match something. It's trying to achieve the absolute. And if it gets more and more resolution and more work that mind was supposed to do, then we can replace that with this mechanical supremacy. Like the military will get part of the brains that will be much more equipped for intercept in space, because they will all see. Another question I have, I was trying to develop an instrument that sees whole space at one time. And, originally, people tried with looking with one eye forward and the other eye backward, because then you can walk forward and also walk forward, backwards at the same time, which would be good for space wars, because that's where the enemy comes from, and then now you have to look at some medium to show you. But of course, this medium is in every car that you drive.
Yeah.
There's a back mirror. And you can perceive these two spaces once you start switching your mind. And it's now as a reference, but if it's somehow switched fast enough, then actually it's continuity. So we have that apparatus already in the car.
I wonder about the creatures that have eyes like this.
Exactly.
Right.
Because the
Yeah.
processing
Right.
of...
Yeah.
Or creatures that can have two, these things, this thing that go on the slime. What are these things called? The things that have eyes on a ball and you look forward and backward.
The maggots? Or the...
Chameleon?
No, I was thinking about this.
Oh, on the snails.
Yeah.
Yes, snails. See, that's what they live in. They see forward and
Feet
backward.
with eyes.
And so this is what's waiting for us, that we will be all visioning. And I mean, Steina came eventually to the concept for her work, which was sphere. And there were two cameras rotating. It's called all vision. And what it is basically is that we know that the sphere contains whole space, the image of a space, but we don't. The cameras see it for us, because then you can see them side by side, or she's put matrix or whatever there. So her tendency of just packaging the space in non-visual, in human vision vectors, it could be done through instrumentation.
Do you want to say something about that?
Well, I was thinking about it. There is also a question of focus here. And what's interesting about the new movies, the ones that are layered, endlessly layered, like say Avatar, but a lot or more, is that everything is in focus. And it's a new concept. And people know there is something else there. There is something, we call it always just high resolution. But it is that
spatial
idea.
resolution.
Yeah, that you can look from treetops down to the earth way below, and everything is in focus. And we are not used to it. It is revolutionary. But that is one of the high definition ideas. But generally, definition, it takes us our breath away. When we see it the first time, like when digital image superseded the 35 millimeter film, and we saw there was a higher definition, and we probably haven't seen anything yet, because the smaller the dots, the more micro they become, the more resolution it will have. And it's always kind of sensational, but then it's also a little boring. It's a little, once we have just seen it, it's there. because the eye wants to feast on something imperfect. Like, why are posters so popular? Posters with just a few letters or some striking things, so suddenly there is a diagonal and that changes everything. And or a poster maybe, what else is? Yeah, all the most iconic pictures that we have.
Signs, kind of
No,
stamps.
no, just think about Mona Lisa, resolution, it doesn't even come in there, but it's a totally recognized image all over the world.
Yeah.
And why is a mystery. I cannot tell you why. I don't know what is remarkable about the picture, and even if it is remarkable, but obviously it strikes something with an awful lot of people.
But give us your interpretation. What's your genesis of the studying this kind of a resolution? What do you see encoded in that?
I think the issue becomes about our physiology. Like what's the data transfer between what bandwidth has the optic nerve got to the brain?
Okay.
The gathering, the sensorium that we inhabit. What are we? What are we, this ape, in relation to this? That's I've long ago stopped worrying about compression and how many lines, how many pixels.
Yeah.
I've come to the issue of, it sounds pretentious, but I can't help it. It's our meaning. What is our meaning in relation to all of these questions?
Yeah.
And what work to do?
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm very conscious that you have to do a presentation shortly.
Yeah, but this is fun.
Yeah.
Well,
we should be doing this
we
with a
may be
glass of
back.
wine.
Because we are hanging on some sort of project that has something to do with the place now. This is the recognition, a project which is really related to this. So we could give you occasional report, but we are network now interested because we have so much stuff, like historically speaking, of our and other people's, from video to documentation and instrumentation, that we have to package it somewhere and deliver. So the network is the only thing we could occupy, because no museum or gallery is really interested in that. We sometimes are lucky that we do curatorship, like someone who understands the evolution of it may include it as part of aesthetic kind of concept, but otherwise it's like educational or curiosity or kind of a collection. But it's very few places that have the dialogue between the tool in an aesthetic sense. They usually see it as a service-oriented, that it serves industrial or visual production, or so it's not the apparatus. Except film are still very sentimental friends, film, camera, and the projector. People fight to have it, but that's a futile, I think, effort, because we have seen just to service that such a system.
Yeah.
It's expensive. You have to man for $200 a day or $300 a day around all the time in a museum. That's kind of boring for them. But anyway, we could continue. Don't take it. This is a finished discussion. Every day.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, we are finished.
We'll have more.
Right.
I think I feel the need to let you. I mean, I know it's fun, but I want to let you be free to do other stuff, and I appreciate. Thanks a lot.
Now, if you
I had
produce
a-
anything out of it, just send it.